recording this, we are taking notes. We always try to remind our guests to be aware when you're discussing, because this is an open discussion, that we are all in this community together, all of our communities together. So just be aware of what you're speaking of and who you are mentioning. We just want to kind of keep things in a broad community sense rather than talking about specific situations. Chris is going to get started. Brian's going to be supporting him through this this presentation specifically. This PowerPoint will be sent to you after we are done. Your meeting notes will be sent to you as well. And if we have any resources that we discuss, we will include those too. Go right ahead. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. So as our esteemed marketing amazing wizard, Natalie indicated, we're talking about being proactive today. And for those who don't know me, my name is Chris. I've been in this industry for a little over 21 years. Well, wait, 24 now? Time flies, right? And then we have Brian with us, who is another manager, and he's got a wealth of knowledge with him as well. So we're gonna hop ahead here. As you can see, our pretty faces. So I like to start this off by setting some kind of foundation for us to work from. Now, most board members that we start working with, they have the mentality that they come into as a board, that their job is to enforce rules and collect assessments. But really, it's much more than that. At the end of the day, you have a responsibility to both do those things as well as maintain, protect, and preserve the common elements. And that's a lot of different things that all tie into that one feature. Now, that is an excerpt right from CAI. It's one of the organizations that we work with. It helps educate community association members, board members, and that's where we get our credentials from. Now, if you're unaware, they do educational classes similar to us, and they have a great similar, like an expo in March. So if you find value in these classes, I think that would also be a great resource to you, and your manager can get you more information on that.
They also do board member trainings too. So if you ever have, if you want to learn like the nuances of being a treasurer or the president, they actually have a full training for that, which is a really great resource to be able to expand your knowledge. Especially if somebody says, I don't know how to do this. You say, here you go. There's a course you can take. Join the board.
So here at KS, we don't want to just manage. We want to have this as a partnership and be able to elevate everyone that we work with. So part of this is to show your full encompassing responsibility as a board member, and to say, hey, we have to be able to look at all of the assets that you may have. Now, an HOA may be different than a condo, but part of today, we're going to go into some of those things to be able to help focus your attention on the important things. So we're going to jump ahead here. Now, the dynamics of community associations are kind of changing here in Michigan. And where I mean by that is a lot of communities that started being built as condos are getting to the age now where roofs are needing to be replaced. And the infrastructure that was built is aging out. Now, that timeline changes across the country, but this topic is becoming much more relevant to us in Michigan because of just when we started building condos and the age of infrastructure. And it became very prominent in the news when in 2021, the high rise down in Florida collapsed because they were ahead. I mean, Florida started doing condos before Michigan did, and they deferred maintenance. They kept pushing things off because they wanted to keep their assessments low. The board members in that community kept changing, and there's a lot of things that played into it, but they deferred the maintenance, and that was the end result, which is pretty devastating. I mean, obviously that is an extreme situation, and we're not every community is facing that level of an issue, but it does show the importance of making sure you're taking care of the community, because that's part of that responsibility.
And now they're actually creating laws around it because to prevent things like that, and as they rightfully should, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. The other thing I think is key to this is a lot of times board members, they think, you know, I have a 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year term. And when you're talking about this proactive playbook, you got to think in terms of some things aren't going to happen for 5 years or 10 years. And Chris is going to go through that more here in a minute. But that's, if you're currently on the board, that's what you guys should have, is you're creating a playbook for whether you're still on the board or not at that time. You're creating a playbook for your association for those things to occur, whether it's budgeting or when do you want to get, you know, proposals or things like that. That's the other thing you want to think about when you're thinking about proactive is what we do now. I might not be here, but it's set up and passed down to where it transfers over, because like Chris is showing you, if you just keep kicking the can down the road saying, well, I don't want to be the board that raises the assessments for the association, I don't want to be this, he's going to show you tools that will help you factually do that. But that's what you as a board you're currently in, that's what you want to have. So I just thought I'd kind of chime that in.
So here's a quick question for our group here. How many of you have had someone, whether it's yourself or another board member, residents, who say, I'm not going to be here when that needs to be done? Or I won't live here that long, or I've had a few say, I won't live that long, but that's not, yeah.
I think that's a lot of the mentality. I think that you could say some people that live in associations don't want to pay for the roofs 5 years down the road because they know they're moving out. So they feel they should be exempt from that.
I don't want to have to pay for that when I won't be here at that time, right?
We're currently going that route now because we're in Hancock woods, and that we just got approval on the loan. We were hoping because it's for our roofs, and it wasn't an easy task.
No, it is not. No, it's not. Yeah.
Oh, it was rough.
Well, and to build off of that, that responsibility as a board member, you have to be able to look out for the community as a whole, not the individual interests of like, hey, you know, I want to keep assessments low. I want to wear that badge of honor. We're the lowest assessments in the area. You know, you have to be able to look at the big picture. Trying to jump ahead. Just as she stands up. So in order to do that, you have to be able to build a solid foundation to work off. Now, I took a trip down south and I saw a building that was actually on blocks like that, a house. And I just love that picture. So this is where it came from, is you can have the most amazing looking community, but if you have a poor foundation that you're working from, it's just a matter of time before that's going to crumble. And so your landscaping may look beautiful right now, but if you don't have a plan to maintain that, it's not going to stay that way forever. Jump ahead. So today, our agenda is to talk about why proactive maintenance matters, give you a framework of how to develop that, tell you why the importance, whether both legally and all the other pressures that are going to have an impact on those decisions, and then how to set that actual plan up. Jump ahead for me. She's dual tasking over there.
Rachel's doing your social media right now, so you're welcome. You're famous.
So I like to set a basic foundation of understanding so we're all working on the same page. Preventative maintenance is taking care of something before it fails. As an example, it's like doing an inspection on your fire suppression system. You know, you're doing those actions to maintain that asset before it actually physically needs work. A great example is your fire extinguishers if you have common hallways. You're technically supposed to send them in on an annual basis to get inspected. But how many of you have maybe a fire extinguisher in your kitchen or somewhere in your house and you not once looked at it in years? Is it even any good anymore? Is it going to function when you need it? So making sure you take care of those things in a preventative measure. Corrective maintenance is, hey, something broke, I need to fix it. I've got a leaking roof, a leaking pipe. That is that corrective maintenance. And no matter what you do preventative wise, at some point in time, you're inevitably going to have corrective maintenance you have to do. It's unavoidable, but the goal is to try to minimize that. The third category is deferred maintenance. Now that it could be a variety of reasons, but we're postponing the work that needs to be done. Could that be we don't have the money to do it? People don't think it's bad enough to be done, but deferred maintenance is going to become a very important question in your community when it comes to lenders and some of those other parties. They're now starting to look at that. So that is a key component that you need to be mindful of in your communities.
I think just to add on that, Chris, with deferred maintenance is it's really easy. And I know it's hard, you know, as a board, you know, each year you may say, well, we'll get to that next. We'll get to that next. And unfortunately, what sometimes will happen for an association is you've kicked not just one can, you've kicked maybe 5 or 6 or 7 cans down the road, and now they all really need attention. And that's where I know you mentioned you guys just recently went out as an association, got a loan.
Yeah.
This is when things really start to come in, is if you defer too often and too much, unfortunately, the chances of all of them needing attention at the same time, you're running a higher risk of that being real. So I just thought I'd kind of chime that in for deferred maintenance also.
Exactly. Now, when you look at preventative maintenance, it's hard to quantify the value of it. Because if you're doing preventative maintenance, you're not having those corrective issues, right? So how do you know if the money I'm spending to inspect something, you know, to do these minor things adds up and is actually saving me money in the long term, right? Well, I've got a couple examples of this that has happened to me or people I know, and it goes to show, hey, the value is truly there. That while you may not have these numbers in your individual association to provide the residents when they ask you, you can give them at least examples. And because they're going to inevitably ask you, why are we spending this money on X, Y, or Z? Why did we need to pay a guy to get up on our roof and inspect them this year? You know, was that $5,000 for that inspection really worth the money? And you're like, well, we think so. But at that point in time, if you don't have anything to share with them, to give them numbers, it's just opinions, right? So if we're going to jump here, and there's actually some numbers. So as an example, I had a community, and in this situation, they're a high rise with a chiller system. It's a water radiated cooling and heating for their building. And the chiller didn't get properly winterized. It wasn't that old, but it failed. And it cost them $120,000 to replace that when it wasn't that old. Versus if they had gotten properly maintained and winterized, yes, that would have been a $5,000 cost, but I'd rather pay $5,000 than $120,000, right? And some of these proactive things can be much smaller. A great example that I like looking at that most people can relate to is changing a light bulb, right? Now, everyone's got lights in their houses and they can fail. They can go out, right? You're going to have to pay someone to come out and fix it. Now, if you've got a fixture that's got 3 bulbs in it and 1 bulb burns out, you pay a guy to come out and replace that bulb. The bulb's maybe $10, depending on the type of bulb you have. But that labor is where a lot of that cost is. Well, if a month later, another bulb in the same fixture fails, you got to pay him to come back out again. That feels like it's an insult to an injury, right? So my mentality, if a bulb goes out in a fixture, I'm replacing all of the bulbs in that fixture as a proactive measure. That way, I know I'm getting another 2, 3, 4, 5, how many types of years you have, how many length it's going to be. That fixture is done. And I save myself the labor of having to replace 2 more bulbs eventually, right? So that's an example on a minor scale of how this can add up. Another one that you can really relate to is the smoke detectors. Most everyone has them in their houses, and if it's a building, in the common hallways. And it never fails that they start chirping on a weekend or an evening, and then the residents are like, will that beeping ever stop? Right? And do you really want to send someone out in the evening or on a weekend and after hour to stop a smoking or beeping smoke detector? Probably not. So for those, for my communities, have them at an annual basis. We're changing batteries. But also, what most people don't realize is smoke detectors have a shelf life. Any smoke detector past 10 years, chances are you can change batteries and it's still going to die. So I have the maintenance guy date every smoke detector they put up. When it starts getting close to 10 years, they're going to replace the smoke detector in advance. Because they're already there, I'm going to save on the labor for the small cost of that smoke detector. So they don't have to one-off come back later because it's chirping. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's jump ahead. Now, my dad was a mechanic, so I like to use that as an example to help it make it more relatable to people. For me, preventative maintenance is like changing your oil. Would you drive a car 200,000 miles without changing the oil? Probably not. Your roof is going to be similar to that. Most people put on a roof and they think they're done for 20 years. We're good, right? But that's not actually how it works. There's actually maintenance that you have to do, like oil changes, to get the 20 years out of it. If you aren't doing that maintenance, you're not going to get that life out of it. The corrective measure, your engine blew up because you didn't change your oil. So now you're obviously going through that stress of getting a new engine in there. And back to the roof maintenance, it's like changing the brake pads on your car. Yeah, you can ignore that squeaking noise, but at some point in time, if you keep ignoring the maintenance that it needs, you're going to have a bigger problem down the road. Let's jump ahead.
Yeah, sometimes it's just as simple as the gutters and looking at that, and then what the actual cause, if they are neglected, that it can have on the entire building itself.
Exactly. Now, when you're looking at your maintenance plan, it's not just one component that you need to be reviewing. There's really 3 main pillars for asset management. It's going to be your maintenance plan itself. It's going to be your budget plan or your reserve study. And then you're going to have inspections. Now, with the maintenance, it's coming up with what assets do we have that we need to be looking at? Who's going to be responsible for inspecting them? How frequently do they get inspected? And what task needs to be done on those things, right? So that is kind of the maintenance plan in a very high level, is just determining all of those things. Now for us at KS Maintenance or Management, we have a lot of resources to us where we can help you make those decisions. Now there's times where our maintenance might be able to come out. There's times where we get a third-party contractor that comes out. Other times it might be a board member who is familiar with something who's doing and looking at those things and then relaying information. But the key part is coming up with a plan of how you're going to maintain those items. The next part is how do we fund that, right? Now, some of the items will be taken care of in your operating budget, like changing light bulbs, right? Some of those bigger tickets, you need to have a reserve study to help you with that. And those who aren't familiar, that is a 30-year plan where you have a third-party engineer who comes out, looks at all of your common elements, and determines what the useful life is left on them. And then they tell you, okay, based on standard inflation, here's how much you should be saving to be able to pay for those things.
I think the key you just said, Chris, that I was hoping everybody heard is third-party engineer, professional person that comes out and inspects these things. They're not just taking a stab in the dark of this is when I think something might need to be replaced. And this tool will help you where I mentioned, you know, if you have a 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year term to be on the board, this is a 30-year plan for your association. This is one of the biggest tools for you to really help plan while you're on the board and then the future as you're setting up the next board and the next board and the next board. Because maybe you don't or aren't going to be on the board when a certain repair needs to happen, but you're going to assist with setting up the funding. Otherwise, you're going to, again, I hate to bring up how the lady here, you're going through a loan. A lot of associations do it. They think, oh, it's brand new. I don't have to worry about it now. We'll get to it. Well, by the time you get to it, it's too late. And now you really need the funds. And we didn't really put enough away in reserves. So we didn't have to do a loan or assessment. So I just wanted to kind of point that a reserve study is, it's a budgeting tool, but this is also will help you with your planning of when these specific common elements are going to need to be replaced. And it's not a guess.
One of the things too is getting the residents to realize, because that's one of our big issues, because we have a lot of older, you know, senior citizens, even though I'm a senior citizen, but getting them to realize some of the things, because it's like, well, it's not that old, and to try to think that it's like, it's a community and would be taking your home, and now it's just everybody all combined. But a lot of them, you know, it's new, we don't need this, but trying to get them to realize that was a hard task to instill.
But these studies are shareable with everyone. And it, like, you know, when you have it, it literally puts specifically when the year, even if it's new or not, they'll actually, it could be 25 years. You know, if you're getting your roofs now, I guarantee if we have a reserve study next year after your new roofs, they'll say replace in 20 to 25 years down the road. And when they show you a calculation for budgeting, that's included into that. So,
and that's what, sorry, but that was one of the things that we had called for a reserve study prior to this, and couldn't get it because it was the thing that, well, it's not old enough, we don't need that yet. So it was a type of thing that trying to get that across, because we're both board members in Hawthorne Woods, and trying to get them to realize that, you know, it's difficult.
Yep.
And so that one didn't go through. And a lot of times too, even with that, with getting a quorum together to get those things taken care of, because you can't just do it on your own. And you try to inform everybody, but it's hard when people don't come to the meetings.
yeah, it is. And the other is, this also helps you because boards, you'll be asked, well, why did you choose to do that repair? Or why did you choose to fix that? And this reserve study helps you explain. We're following this reserve study, and it tells us when to do this one, when to do this one. So for the board, it's a great tool for you to have and follow.
Well, and just like anything else, you need to be mindful of who you select to do your reserve study, because you're going to get what you pay for. And I took on a community that I started working with who they found the cheapest option available to check the box. We got a reserve study. And when I looked at it, it had all of the elements for the most part, and it had replacements, but nothing was built in there for the maintenance. So it had, here's when you did your roads, and here's when you're going to be replacing them in, 15 years from now. There was no crack sealing, there was no patching, there was no repairs along the way. And I'm like, okay, I guess you got a piece of paper, but this doesn't give you a real plan to maintain that item. And we'll touch base on that a little bit more here, but it similar goes to other things, that the cheapest option isn't always the best one. And know that all of these things that we put together, whether it's the maintenance plan, the reserve study, they're plans. They're living items that are meant to adjust as you go. The other item on here is the inspections. Now, what makes KS somewhat unique is we build into our services where we come out and inspect the property twice a month. I came from another management company that wasn't the thing. And I think this adds a huge value to the community where we're seeing those, but we're just one piece of that puzzle. We can't possibly see everything. And those inspections are really a team effort, whether it's residents who are seeing things, board members. I mean, one of the other advantages, we have KS Landscaping, and for those communities that they serve, Avery and some of the other crew guys, when they see things, they report it to us. They're that added level of eyes and ears that just adds that extra level of seeing things. So inspections give you that real-time data, because your reserve study might say, hey, you're going to get 2 more years, 3 more years out of your roof. But when you actually start looking at the data, like, hey, we're getting a lot of work orders for roofs leaking. I can see from my inspections, shingles are starting to peel. That might be a flag to you to say, hey, we need to escalate our timelines, right? We're going to jump ahead.
Yeah, the proof is in the pudding sometimes. Doesn't matter what's on paperwork. If you can, there's a little bit of signals here and there. And that could just be, weather or wear or a really bad storm that came through, and more, your roofs to the point where they're pretty okay. And then one day they're not.
Yep.
Yeah.
With a reserve study, I like to refer them as like a toll road, right? There are some communities who the residents and the board have a mentality, we're going to keep our assessments low, and whenever we need money, we'll do an additional assessment, right? We'll ask for that influx of funds when we need it. The problem with that is you may have someone who lives there for the majority of that life of the roof. They sell their unit right before the roofs need to be replaced. Now that new owner has to bear the burden of that additional assessment when they just moved in. Yep.
At Kings Point, we replaced our roofs 24. There were 3 people who had just bought in the community. And when they heard that we needed new roofs, they said, we're moving. And they sold it.
Oh, wow, really?
Yes, and one person did not tell either their real estate agent or the new buyer that we were getting new roofs. And that person moved in and was very hot because they got the assessment right away.
Mm-hmm. So for me and my perspective, and what I coach most boards that I work with, is living in an association is like paying a toll road, right? You pay for what you use. And that's how reserve studies are set up, is you're doing the reserve contributions, paying into those bank accounts to properly, fully fund the project when it's needed. So the people who lived and took advantage of your pool or the house, right? You put money away for the time you lived there. And that in itself can be sometimes a hard thing to get across to communities, right? But if you try to raise your assessments to fund the reserves properly, and you don't have anything to support that decision, I bet you're going to get a lot of kickback. Versus if you have a document like a reserve study that supports that decision, you say, hey, we hired an expert to come in. They assessed all of our community, and this is the recommendation that they have, and we were following those recommendations. And the key part of your association's insurance is the board has D&O insurance that covers your decisions. if you have something that's supporting your decision, a judge is going to stand up and say, hey, they're following the good business judgment rule. And if someone were to try to sue the board for their actions, you're covered because you were following those recommendations. Versus if you just on your own said, I don't think that's needed, right? I know what I'm talking about. I'm a hairdresser. I know roofs, right? I deal with the tops all the time. And the judge doesn't go, what? Come again? Like, I'm not following the logic here, right? So when in doubt, if you're not an expert in that field, bring the people who are in to give you guidance. And then when you get questioned by your residents, you have support that backs up those decisions. And oftentimes that will put a lot of those frustrations, if not resolve them, at least simmer them down where you can move forward and take care of things.
So one of the things that we teach our board members is we want to be able to intercept some of that pressure that you get and you're going to get in your communities. And one of the ways to do that is what Chris is saying is, say you have a reserve study that's been done and you have to go to talk to your community and say, all right, we've got to do something about this. You do not have to deliver that message alone. You can have your management company to back you up, but we can bring in the professionals who did the reserve study or the roofing company and they can show drone footage. The biggest takeaway for us is transparency. If you are just putting that in your back pocket and you're fighting that war by yourself as a board, trying to figure it out, and then one day you say, hey, guess what? This is happening. And you're going to get this assessment. That if they are in the know over the long term, it's a lot easier for them to wrap their minds around maintenance projects that might be outside of what they thought, were coming up. If you just keep the communication open.
Well, and a great real life example to this is we took on a client that was self-managed and they had a really small reserve bank account. And I looked at the community when I walked around, I'm like, your roofs are end of life. All of these other projects are end of life. And you don't have any money saved away to do any of this. Like, well, we do additional assessments. Okay. Well, I don't think that the people are going to want to be additional assessed for that amount. So your other option is potentially a loan. But because of the community you're not going to be able to get a loan without a reserve study. So if you wait till the 11th hour, and reserve studies a good one will take you 5 to 6 months to get done. If you wait to the 11th hour and now you need a loan to get the roofs done and they want a reserve study, you may have passed your summer window of getting done just to get your reserve study in, right? So I sat down with them and said, hey, don't just take my word for it. Let's have a company come out. We'll do the reserve study, have them tell us, and then we can have, well in advance, we started at the beginning of the year, and then it'll tell us what we need to do budget-wise. We communicated to residents. We had them involved in the process, so it wasn't just us sitting in a dark room plotting against residents, right? Smoking cigars and, right? It's not like that. We brought them along for the ride. We communicated every step of the way what we were doing. When we got the study, we shared it with them. Like, hey, here's what it is. We're going to have a meeting. Come and ask us questions, right? Not very many people showed up, but we made the effort. Then when the budget time came around and we said, hey, we're going to be raising assessments based on all of this information, we even got some bids that align with our reserve study for these projects that are coming up. The residents are like, whoa, oh, okay. And it just squashed a lot of that because we were proactively got in front of it. And now, next year, they're going to be able to do their roofs without an additional assessment. Because we started the process early enough, we saw what was coming, and we planned for it. We were being proactive instead of reactive. And that's the key part I want. If you take nothing else from this training today, that is something you need to be able to be mindful of.
And I guess I could say too, that's easier said than done
Yep.
too. Because, where we tried to do the other reserve study and it just wouldn't fly.
Correct.
Because, well, they're not that old in that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's gonna come up. And, so we did put, because we have another thing with, roads,
Yep.
where we're at. Because, there's another association right in there with us, and they share the same road, and they are still building. Well, we've been putting aside for roads and things like that. And so then the homeowners are, well, we haven't done the roads, now you want this. So it's trying to get, like, want some return up or whatever, but it's difficult because they're saying, well, we didn't do the roads. Well, that was explained to them, but then that's easily forgotten too, because no matter what you do, those trucks coming in when they're building, you cannot stop them.
Yep.
And so it's two battles that we're fighting, and it's just that, and some people just want nothing. They just don't want to give any money, and it's difficult.
But
We have 148 units.
Mhm.
So it's difficult to try to get a common goal there. And when people don't come to even hear what you've got to say, and it's just very difficult trying to get that out there.
believe it or not, you're actually in a really advantageous position right now. And what I mean by that, and what I mean by that is it's hard for people to recognize the importance of something until it impacts them, right? And so sometimes you need I just skinned my knee, I just did something that hurts to wake people up, because apathy is a problem in today's society. You can't get people to do anything. Joining the board is a great example, right? That is something everyone can relate with, right?
Excuse me, one interruption. Trying to get people to do the board. I got on the board when I first moved in there, and that's been 13 years, and I've been on the board since then because nobody wants.
Correct. Things are going good. I don't want to be involved, right? But when something hurts, people are now aware. They're awake. And when they're awake, that's the time you can utilize that energy, because they're focused now on you, to make change. It's not easy. It's like pulling a Band-Aid off. It hurts, but it allows you to get change done, right? I had a community that needed to change their governing documents, and no one would vote for it. They then had a perfect storm disaster that came through that impacted a third of the community. And I'm like, hey, you now are all paying for this, right? They were all awake and engaged, and we used that to get them motivated, and we made changes to the documents that were needed. So when you have people frustrated, channel that energy in the direction, don't fight them, bring them along for the ride. When they're involved and engaged, use that energy, because it's not going to last long. It's like me trying to run. I can go to the mailbox. Oh, I can get there, right? But I am not doing a marathon, right? Most residents are going to be like that. Use that energy to get the things you need done, right? It's not going to be easy. I don't like running. Ooh.
Since I think my shoulders have gotten really broad. But and it's difficult because you can't. We've had to change our bylaws, I think, 2 or 3 times to be able to get a quorum to vote. And when you don't have the people that come in, it's very difficult. And that, you have to do legal and everything like that. But even though you tell everybody, it's just when they don't come in, if you don't have that quorum, we've had to go down, I think, 3 times to be able, and we still don't have enough to make a quorum. So it's been difficult. And then with this, Oh, but I'll tell you, that meeting we had, that was something.
Mhm.
You start showing up when you say that they're gonna have higher dues or that there's an assessment.
Yeah,
And that is true. A lot of times what we've said in our board member trainings is when you have someone that is saying, this is a problem, say, I'm so happy you're paying attention. Why wouldn't you take and build a committee that's gonna help to solve this problem? And not to necessarily be on the board, because people get a little bit
Mhm.
backed by that, but if you can get them on a committee and say, okay, you're going to be leading this committee that's gonna work on, bring us some better quotes,
We
bring us
tried
some
that.
bids and everything.
we've
Yeah.
tried that. It's very difficult to
Yeah.
get people to do something. It's like, you might be willing, but you can't do it yourself, but to try to get people, because there are a lot of older people
Mhm.
that to try to get them to do that. It's difficult because people complain, but yet they don't want to have any part in helping with that.
But see, what most people do is they say, hey, join the committee. And that is a big, in someone's mind, a big
Yeah.
task, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to commit to that. You know, it's like, I'm going to go back to me running, right? If you tell me I got to run a mile, I'm like, oh, but you say I just got to go to the mailbox. I can get to the mailbox, right? You break it down into small pieces, and then people are more apt to start that. And then once you get them initiated and they're moving, all right, I can do this, right?
Yeah.
No. I've got a daughter who she is the biggest initiation failure I have ever met in my life, right? You try to tell her a task, she's like, ooh, no, right? But if I say, hey, can you come give me a hug? She gets up. I'm like, oh, now that you're up, let's do this. And she's like, oh, Dad.
And I
Right?
think once they get into it, wouldn't be half as bad.
Exactly.
Getting them to do that, that's the.
Small tasks, small bites. All right, let's jump ahead.
Let's see.
More?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, did it not even
It
change?
didn't even change.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So building off your reserve study, some of the things that you need to look at and ask questions when you're having that done. And if you have a good reserve study company, they're going to ask you these questions. One of that is, how are you maintaining your community? What are your maintenance practices, right? Because if they're going to project you're going to get 20 years out of the road, you have to be able to do the maintenance to get it there, right? And so if they're not asking or building into your plan, how are you going to maintain this? Then how did they come up with the 20 years, right? So when I sat down with a company before and I've told them that, hey, the board's really not in favor of doing these things, he shortens the life. You're not going to get that out of it, right? So asking them, how did you determine those useful lives? Because I've got some companies that come in and they're just, I'm plunking a number and that's what it's going to last. I'm like, the study isn't going to be as worth the paper it's printed on. You need to be able to ask that question and figure out and determine what you're going to do to maintain that. Roofs, roads, a lot of your common elements, you have to be able to build that into it. So what level of maintenance are you assuming when you do this plan? All right, jump ahead. Now, in Michigan, we have different high-risk zones than other areas of the country, but some of the big ones you should be looking at: your roofs, your pavement. If you've got decks and balconies, those are some pretty big ones. And then plumbing is the bane of our existence with frozen pipes and things of that nature. But one that frequently gets overlooked is aging infrastructure. Now, I have a bunch of communities that are older and they were built the 60s or something like that, right? A lot of them have cast iron pipes. They don't last forever. And so one of the communities is actually now in a process where all their plumbing is through their cement floors. and they're having to cut open cement floors and replace that cast iron because it's failing. And in this one situation, they have mains that are coming in, and over the duration of the life and all the sediment that's been in the city water and things of that nature, when they started replacing them, the actual inside of the pipe was that, right? So it restricted a 3-inch pipe down to a 1-inch pipe. And the amount of water pressure that those residents got after we did the replacement, they're like, what just happened?
This is what happens when you invest in your
Right.
community.
But that buildup was over years. They were getting all these backups. And so we came in and we put together a plan and we are taking care of the issue. But that's an example of who thought we were going to have to replace the plumbing in the floor. Right. So those things are all things that need to be taken into consideration when you're doing your plan. Now, we are coming up on, because things are starting to age out, a lot of the different entities are now becoming hypersensitive to the communities. And we're getting pressure from all different kinds of angles, both on the legal side, municipal requirements. The insurance companies are now trying to find ways to mitigate their liability. And then you also have the lenders, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, who are all saying, hey, we don't want to loan money to clients that there may be issues in that community. So all of those things are all now pushing on us, adding additional requirements.
And that's another reason why in your meeting notes, they're so important to be able to log over time that you are being, transparent with the community. Because of neglect and because of deferred maintenance, sometimes those things can catch up to you. If that can is kicked over and over again, you have a record of saying, we've been discussing this, we've put everything out there to be able to maintain this. I couldn't get quorum, so I wasn't able to move this through, but we are doing everything, our due diligence and our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that this is happening.
Now, one of the big legal changes that came about not that long ago was the Janani versus London Townhouses Supreme Court ruling. What it basically did was, before, co-owners had an equal share of the common elements, and there was open and obvious law. So if you tripped and fell, there was some open and obvious that would protect you, but also as an equal share of the co-owner of the common elements, you couldn't really sue yourself, right? Well, this ruling changed that and basically said co-owners, because they don't have active control of the common elements, are considered invitees of the grounds and are now awarded the highest level of duty for care and can much more now easily sue the association and win for slip and fall and other types of claims. And so this really changed and increased the exposure of liability to associations. And so before, with open and obvious, someone would fall, they just couldn't sue. Now the courts can say, well, it was obvious, but you had a duty to care to take care of that, so you still have to pay even though it was obvious. So that's a big legal change that has come about, as well as the courts now no longer upholding the open and obvious rulings. The other is insurance companies. They are getting hit by large losses from hurricanes and other things. And so they're now starting to look at how to minimize the impact that they have. They started off by looking at roofs. So what they will do is they'll say, okay, how old's your roof? I don't care what condition it is, how old is it? If it's over a certain age, we're either A, going to cancel your policy, or B, add a, well, not necessarily a surcharge. What they have is it's a little asterisk on your policy that says you're now going to have a wind and hail portion that you have to pay. It could be a 1, 2, 3% of the total loss that you now have to cover, right? They'll add those things in there to help protect them. But they've started to increase those things that they're looking at. They're looking at circuit breaker panels. If you have certain ones, whether it's a fuse panel or there's certain types of panels like Federal Pacific that are aluminum that are known to oxidize and catch fire. If you have those panels in your community, they will require you to remove them. One of the communities I managed, they were older, they had fuse panels. They did their annual inspection. They said, hey, you got fuse panels. You have 30 days to replace all of the fuse panels in the entire community. In this situation, 277, that the co-owners are responsible for. You have to replace all of them, otherwise we're canceling your policy. I'm like, how in the world am I going to get, even if we were responsible for it, to get enough electricians in to do that work in 30 days, even if I could afford it? So they didn't care. Said, this is your obligation. Now, things have changed a little bit since then, and now they'll, hey, if you've got a plan and you're working towards it, a lot of times they'll give you some flexibility for it. But if they know it's there, and if you don't change it and they cancel, you move out of the standard pool of carriers and you go into the high risk category. And in those situations, your policy could double or triple. So for them, that specific community, they had to go into a high risk policy carrier and their premium doubled.
Got a question.
Yep.
I'm trying to relate that to owls because, you know, okay, say you mentioned with that, with the electrical or things like that. How, being that everyone has their own in the 148 units, how is it going to be something that's going to be something that they are going to have to do? I mean,
Are you single family homes or are you attached condos?
We're attached.
Yep. So, yep.
So that's my thing, how to even get them to realize that, okay, you've got your circuit breakers. I guess that's what the way that even those are going to be up to code. You know, how would you even get someone? I can't.
So in that's where here at Chaos, we can help walk you through that. You know, I had to do this for a couple of the communities that I manage. And what we did is basically told the residents, hey, here's the situation, the world we're in right now. Here's why we have to do this. And we reached out to a handful of contractors who are familiar with the situation. They came out and inspected a unit. Here's the cost, general speaking. I mean, each unit might be a little different. Here's the estimated cost. So if you want to use them, you can, or use whoever you want. But this is what needs to happen. And this is when it needs to happen by. Now, in most documents, and you can speak with your legal counsel on it, it has a provision in it that says that you need to maintain your unit in a safe condition. And if there's anything in your unit that causes the association's insurance premium to go up, you're going to be responsible for the cost. And so what we did is said, hey, we're covering the premium increase because this is what we have to deal with until we get to a certain stage. Anyone who's left who hasn't done the conversion, you now get to pay the difference for that premium increase.
Because, you know, you have two, you know, you have the one that KS does, you know, from the outside, and then we have the one inside. And some of the units, I think, you remember when they said some of them were built, was it 14? 2014 or 15?
Oh, three.
03, and so some of them are going to be older, and then mine is the last one. So how?
So what you can do, and again, there's a list of the ones that are banned. Now, generally, you're going to see those in units that are built in the 70s and 80s. After 2000, rarely any of that ban list gets
Okay.
installed, right? So if you're a relatively newer community, you probably have a smaller risk of this topic. But just know that it is a thing, and also that just like every other thing, it has a shelf life. So even if you don't have one of the banned list items, they say any circuit breaker that's older than 40 years needs to be inspected.
Well, it's just something that came to my mind
Yep.
when you start talking about it, because it's something that the person that owns, that has that unit, and I thought, well, the lights of that, and, cause I know I had a Generac installed, so when I had that, they actually inspected mine.
Mhm.
And so then they actually had to put in something else to accommodate the
Mhm.
dual. But I'm just wondering on some of the older units that were some of the first ones there, how.
Well, and I'm not trying to scare you guys
No,
into,
I'm just what I'm
Yes.
saying, because when you're all attached,
Yeah.
listen, I thought about fires with just how my neighbor is or how lax or may not be. So it's a thing that's always in my head
Sure.
as to what to do.
Sure.
That was just something that, yeah, I had a concern about, 'cause fire can happen, it's just. People are.
Yep. So the next side of this is going to be the lenders, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Now, they are starting to require that associations have reserve studies, that it can't be more than 3 to 5 years old, and that you're fully funding that study. You didn't just get the piece of paper and file it away, you're actually following it. So and why this is important is, while Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae tend to be FHA loans, they are really big. So a lot of the others like Rocket Mortgage and other traditional lenders, they don't hold on to the loans. They do the transaction and then they sell the loans off. And they sell them to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And so in order for that to happen, they have to meet the same guidelines. So what they're requiring is A, you have the reserve study, but B, have proof that you aren't deferring maintenance. And in certain structures like high rises, you have to have certain engineer studies done every so often and be able to provide that to show that you're maintaining the asset. They're no longer just taking your word for it. They want documentation showing that it is indeed happening. And starting next year, they're increasing those requirements for associations. So right now, your minimum threshold to maintaining your reserve account is 10%. Starting in January, that goes to 15%. So they are constantly squeezing and making changes that will impact you guys.
And this is something that real estate agents have been coming to us and asking these questions because it affects them in a big way in their transactions and making sure that they can actually fund the loans that they need in order for people to purchase the condos and HOAs.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to actually putting together your plan, you should break it down into seasons. Again, like I said, the baby steps, run into the mailbox, right? So break your plan down into the little compartments. And I like to do it by season. So and it's going to be case by case by the community, right? If you're a community that's built in a field with no trees, you probably don't have to do gutter cleaning, right? But if you're in the woods, that all your buildings are surrounded by trees and then it's in your name, Hawthorne Woods, right? Then you're probably going to do gutter cleaning both in the spring and in the fall, right?
Yeah.
Also, once you get through Michigan's winter, having them come out and do crack sealing to prevent water getting down into the asphalt over the winter and breaking it up even more. Looking at your drainage, making sure, and this is one of the things that easily gets forgotten, is your storm sewer, right? Who's cracking open the catch basins and looking down there to see if it's full of debris?
Because I don't, for being the time, I have never seen it yet.
Mm-hmm. If you had a retention pond, they've got overflow drains. Who's inspecting that to make sure that they're not starting to fail, right? So inspecting those things getting your irrigation system opened up and running and inspecting that. So those are kind of some big ticket spring ones. If we jump on into summer, we're going to have, if you have like a clubhouse, having your HVAC system looked at. I even sometimes will even have, reminders for residents to say, hey, even though you're responsible for your own HVAC system, to have it inspected, clean, service, that kind of thing, because most people may not think about it, but your electric bill is going to go way up if your condenser unit's all clogged up, right? So having those cleaned and taken care of, having your pool and other amenities looked at and serviced. So your typical other big projects like painting and other things to stay on top of it, because it's a lot easier to deal with the problems when they're small than when they get big. Was there a question online? I thought I heard someone. Okay. And because we're not like Arizona where we can do capital projects year round, the summer is a great time to be able to knock those projects out. And for me, I'm planning my capital projects for next year right now. That way I can get contracts in place, numbers in place when I do my budget, and then on their list. So come the beginning of the summer, we're one of those first projects that are actually being done rather than trying to get bids in the middle of the summer with the hopes that I may be able to squeeze in at the end. You also tend to get a little bit better pricing when they're looking for projects rather than they're like, ooh, I'm overloaded, right? So that's gonna be your summer. And then fall, we're back to gutter cleaning for those who have trees, right? Now I have some communities that don't have a ton of trees and they still do an annual gutter cleaning or a biannual one. And what we build into it is they're not just necessarily cleaning out the gutters, but they're getting up and inspecting them and nailing, the tacks in if they're starting to come loose. So it's less the cleaning side of it as well as the inspection and service side of it. So even if you don't have the trees, doing that service has value, right? Because the gutters can come off or water starts getting behind them and start rotting the wood. And you don't know that it's rotting the wood until the gutter starts falling off, right? So that's that example of that preventative maintenance to fix it before it becomes reactive maintenance. And then in the winter, looking at your ice damming and seeing, okay, hey, I see that we have an ice dam problem. What are the steps we need to do to mitigate that? Whether it's heat tape, whether it is changing the ventilation on our buildings, whatever it is, but looking at those problems and trying to get in front of it, because it's far easier to fix the problem than deal with water damage that causes and as a result of it after the fact. I also use this time in the winter to do some of those internal preventative measures like changing the smoke detectors, inspecting the fire extinguishers, and doing those kind of things. For me, when I first started in this industry, there was ups and downs throughout the year. There was crazy summers and then really, other than snow, slow winters, right? And I figured out how to balance that out so it's consistent across the summer and I'm able to balance those things more easily because I'm looking ahead and planning for them, right?
Proactive, I love it.
Yes. The other big component, and I kind of touched base on this earlier, is hiring quality people to do the work. And I think Brian can attest to some of this, and even some, our amazing newer manager, Kristen, is experienced of dealing with a bad contractor, or you may have had a good contractor over a period of time, you just had a really weak contract, and then when something bad happened, fighting them over it because you don't have a solid contract to deal with, right? I mean, there's a lot of communities that have, contractor Bob that, you know, he's a one-man show, he does a good job, maybe his paperwork isn't that great, right? But he does a decent job and he's cheap.
Well, sometimes, cheap is not always the best, because one of the things is with our original builder, well, he did go bankrupt, but he cut a lot of corners, and it really made it bad, like with gutters and things like that. He put smaller things in with that. Downspouts, he just did what he had to get by. There were a number of things that had been done, and so you try to do some catch up, because you don't know what's going to happen, because it's just new places. And then as the problem arises, because he driven by on so much, so it's like we do some of the ice jams, but a lot of that was we replaced the gutters and things and that they come up. But we actually have like electrical. We put what do you call it? Just an actual,
The heat tape.
I guess, and it just melts everything. Because it's terrible, because of the gutters and the downs, everything would overflow, because I had to have mine replaced. But a lot of that, you don't think about it at the beginning, because, well, this was a builder, he should have, and so a lot of these come to light after the fact. But
I'd like to say that that's a unique experience, but it's actually a lot of the development is done fast and easy, and lacking in those details. And that seems to be, I won't say all, but it seems to be the majority of, build them up quick and sell them off, hand it over to the board and say, see you later, right? They don't have to deal with it after that. So that's another thing, is we try to work with developers who we know have a solid reputation, and then put things into place to be able to vet those vendors, so when you have to fix those things, that you're getting the right people to do that. And Chris and Brian and Kristen here are really, really great at that. Like, let's look at this, but let's maybe have a few bids and then see if we can find the right one.
And some of that you don't know when that builder's coming in, and then after that it's like, oh, okay, this is what's happened. So he's gone bankrupt, but then in the meantime you're left with what's been done, and you're there.
So when I look at a contractor, there's 3 qualities that I say that you're probably going to be considering. One is, are they good? 2 is, are they quick? And 3 is, are they cost effective? Generally, you're only getting 2 out of the 3. All right. So if you want something that's good and quick, it's not going to be cheap. If you want something that's cheap and quick, it's probably not going to be good. All right. If you can find all 3, don't tell anyone about that contractor. Because he's going to get really busy, right? But also, no matter how those qualities you decide your priority, right, is having a good agreement in place. And there should be standard general provisions that you have on your documents that cover you. And it's not to be red tape or add bureaucracy to a process that's unnecessary. But at some point in time, something could go wrong, and you need to have a mutually agreed upon understanding of how those are handled. And while it might not necessarily be required for a $20 sprinkler head, but a $100,000 roof, you better be having some general provisions, right? And there are times where you may not want to spend the money, but getting your attorney involved to review those contracts can sometimes save you in the long run. Because there might not, unless you're an expert in contract law, there may be things that you're not aware of. I have a high rise that was doing an elevator modernization project, and they didn't have time is of the essence in their contract. They are now 4 years later and their elevator's not done. And legally, they don't have any grounds to stand on because that one phrase wasn't in there.
I think I was waiting for you to go through, and that was one of the things I was just going to add to it is is even if you're used to a contractor, just make sure you have these preventative things in your contract and that you look at it, because I know people, we've been using them for years. They always take care of us. But like Chris has mentioned, yeah, everything's great when it's going well, but when something goes wrong, it's amazing how partnerships or agreements change to where now, what do you mean I have to fix this? Well, you broke it when you were doing whatever. Well, if it's not in the contract or if there's anything in there of what they're liable for, then it could create a problem. So that's another thing with your contractor, is just make sure you guys spell out exactly what you want them to do.
Well, and let's just get out of the doom and gloom, and let's just say that the actual positive side of things, right? You have a board that is functioning just top notch, right? There's very engaged individuals that are working with the contractor. You got a contract that's, yeah, okay, it's not bad, right? Contractor's doing a nice job. That board member decides to sell and leave, who is out there guiding the contractor, and he's gone. And then you decide to change contractors for whatever reason. He decides he's going to sell the business. What documentation do you have that says what was even done or how it was done to know to get another bid that's apples to apples, right? I mean, I've got a gentleman on the board that he is amazing, does all this kind of stuff. I don't know what he does. And then they asked me to go get bids, and I'm like, for what? I don't know what you do. And he's like, well, I do stuff. And I'm like, that's not, I can't write stuff on the paper, right? So while it may seem tedious and unnecessary, you're not all going to be on the board forever. And that knowledge has to be documented in some capacity, right?
We actually have, like through KS, one of the wonderful things about having us as your management company is it's not just Chris as your manager. They have an entire team behind you. And what we've started doing over the years is reviewing contracts, not just at the manager level, but also as a company as a whole. And taking a little bit of a deeper dive at some of the verbiage and just making sure that our managers and our communities have that extra level of insurance. And just, all right, if it becomes a problem, then do we need to escalate this to an attorney? And you have some experts that are on our team, like Chris, who has his PCAM, the number of years in education and experience. He can look at a contract and say, oh, no. Or thumbs up, this is looking really, really good. So it's nice to have the team to support you too. You're not in this alone.
Because the number of what I call napkin contracts that I've seen that, I mean, might not have ketchup stains on them, but they're not far from that. It surprises, it might blow your mind of how many of them are out there, right? So we're gonna jump ahead. Now, the other aspect is levering technology. Now, I may not look it, but I've been around a couple days, and when AI came out, I was like, I can write my own emails, all right? I can write my own letters. I don't need something to help me out. And then I realized, while I still can, what took me 20 minutes before now takes me 30 seconds, right? Or with our technology that we have, I can be out in the field and say, hey, I think there was something on this. My memory, my sponge might be a little full here. There's some cobwebs up there, but I'm pretty sure I think there's something. And then I just pull it right up on my phone and look it up. I mean, Brian, he's a big person that's helped us out. I mean, when we were doing our inspections, he found a program that we were already paying for that we can use to document our inspections, and it integrates right into what we already have. And it's like, okay, as a team, we're always kind of trying to innovate, find ways to improve. And sometimes technology, it can be hesitant to use it, but it can also make our jobs a lot easier in a lot of different ways. For us, we don't want to be the gatekeeper of your information. We want to be a team. So if you use our portal, you can see a lot of the information live. If you want to go into a work order, you can see the communication we're having with contractors, with the co-owners. So you know exactly what's going on with all the items. But we try to use those technology to our advantage.
I think when you embrace technology, you'll find it's easier to communicate. Pictures are so much easier to clarify things. You know, with this program, literally I use a pen and I can circle. So now when I send the board, this is what I'm looking at, I can literally circle the item on the picture to help you. So, you know, just things like that when you're really trying to, you know, share, utilizing technology makes it quicker and easier. So that way you get the real and it's easier to go through.
So to kind of wrap today up, I've got a kind of a case study, and this is loosely based on two communities that I managed back in the day. They were right next to each other, built by the same developer, basically had the same buildings, but the board had two separate philosophies of how they wanted to handle things. So for simplicity purposes, we've got Reactive Ridge, who their mentality was keeping dues low. I mean, to the point where they wanted to remove the grass and put AstroTurf in, so they didn't have to cut grass. They deferred maintenance all over the place, and they kept it running, right? But it because it was built really nice, it looked well for a period of time, but it slowly started to deteriorate because they were doing the bare minimum. And we have Proactive Point, who had the reverse side. They got a reserve study, they did proper maintenance, they planned ahead, they were constantly doing those preventative maintenance items, and their assessments were a lot higher. In this specific situation, the one was $310 a month, the other one was $240. Basically the same association right across the street from each other. Jump ahead. What happened after 15 years is the roads were shot. The roofs needed to be done, and the landscaping looked, well, they said it wasn't bad with quotes. I always like the air quotes when you're trying to say something is okay. But they had a lawsuit against them, and they ended up having to do a really big assessment because all of their stuff, kind of like what Brian was hinting to, all came due right at once. They kept saying, well, it's not so bad. I know we were planning on doing it this year, but let's push it out a little bit further, right? Well, enough stuff got to the point where like we can't keep pushing it, and now we have to do everything all at once rather than have been able to phase it over time. So they got hit with a huge assessment. The other community, they have never had an additional assessment in their entire existence because they planned ahead. And while things were generally in decent condition, they still replaced them. Not to say they were in a good condition, but they were okay. They still replaced them because it kept them on that staggered approach so that everything didn't all hit at one time. And they were a large community. They were 310 units. So they spread that out and were able to keep things in a really great position. And they haven't had lawsuits. They didn't have additional assessments, but their assessments were progressive. People knew what to expect. And while they didn't necessarily like the higher assessments, they liked the quality of life that they received. And at the end of the day, living in an association is picking the lifestyle you want. If you want to have probably one of the largest investments you have, your home, taken care of, you have to be willing to pay for it and take care of it. Something
I just want to kind of point out with reserves, I've had associations where they'll watch that number and think when we have a high amount that it's a good thing. It is a good thing. But your reserves isn't a save as much as possible. So that way, we don't want to touch it. Your reserves should go up and down as you're spending your money. You're putting money away for these capital projects or improvements. So your goal, again, with the reserve study, you want to have a goal of what you need to have in your reserves to cover your project, whatever it may be, still have money in your reserves, and then you're being proactive with your yearly budgeting, that what you're putting back into it gets you back to another goal, like amount for that next major project. And he keeps bringing up the two big ones for a lot of associations, and that would be roofs and roads. You generally try and avoid having both of them right next to each other in years and stuff. That you try and spread them out because you want to replace the roofs, and then obviously your bank account, your reserves, is going to be down some because you spent all that money. Then you're building each year with your reserves being, money put in, back up to a point where now the roads become, it's time to do it. You have the funds ready to go, you spend it, comes back down. So it's a cycle that you want to look at with your reserves is, what is our never go below line? I know he brought up the 15% that you will be required to have for reserves, but you also want to have additional funding for something that comes up unplanned. Sure, we had a plan and this was supposed to land as 6 more years. Unfortunately, you didn't get it. And you want to at least have that money available or something like that, an amount. So I just wanted to kind of also share that with reserves, understand how it's going to, the ebbs and flows, how is this going to go up and down with what you plan on repairing or replacing.
Well, and new owners are getting more and more wise to condominium living. We actually do realtor training to help teach them on that. So when they can look at the financials, look at that reserve study, know to even ask for it, so that they can tell which communities are properly taken care of and which ones aren't. That way, the new owners, when they buy in, they're avoiding those, hey, you get to pay an extra $20,000 this year. No one wants that.
So this is the call to action, our conclusion to this. So I know Chris has really come, these topics and just association management in general can lean a little bit negative, but the positive of this is preventative maintenance makes your life and everybody in the community's life easier. So those thorn in your side community members that don't fully understand it, just keep hammering, just keep working at it, just keep, bringing it up and working towards becoming more efficient, trying new things, relying on the management company, relying on your vendors and all of that to be able to take it to the next level. Because the more proactive you are, the better off you are long term. And then you say, I don't want to spend that money right now. And then when it happens, a big assessment comes in and then everybody's upset saying, we proposed this to you 2 years ago. We would have had money in the bank to pay for these things. Let's revisit that right now and start increasing the dues to be able to fund our reserves and pay for this.
This was very good. I did catch a lot and learn a lot with this. And it's just, see, there's supposed to be 6 on our board. Well, right now it's only 3, me, her, and our president. And it's bad because people don't want to do that. So when we had our last meeting where we put out the information for the roofs and that, we got all kinds of people that wanted to. So hopefully with this, it'll help. But, I just wish that there was someone, because this was very informative. And I think if more board members were to, how can I say, if they knew about this or just to take something like this, it really helps because it gives you a little bit more insight as to what you, because a lot of things, I mean, I didn't know you're volunteers.
Mhm.
And it's just like, you're just dropped in here because nobody wants to do it. So it's a learning process as you go, but it's like, oh, it's just too bad. It's like when you're in school, well, you need to take this class in order to do this. But being that you're volunteering, you can't do that, but I think I found a lot. I don't know about you, Diane. But
Well, this
it
thing
was-
with, we always are so proud of any time our board members show up and they come to our educational seminars. So you can lead as an example. And really, when you come in and educate yourself, you're going to be able to take things to the next level. And encourage other people, and maybe not necessarily in your community, others' communities, but, coming to the expo is an excellent example of that. That's one of the biggest takeaways from our board members was it was so nice to be able to hear a story and to know like, oh, I'm not alone in this, or we sat at a table and we, exchanged numbers and now we actually can talk about what's going on in our community. So first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, just keep showing up and educating yourself and pick up the phone. You have amazing resources here with our management team.
And this was very good, but,
It wasn't just the mimosas that you love.
oh, no, if somebody used their ticket, I would have gotten me another drink. But, I went and, my sister and her husband are two residents there, so they went. And this time I'm bringing a friend and, went around to each one of the vendors. And there was a number of things that I found out that, I didn't know were available.
Right, and that's what, we're gonna talk about that a little bit. Talking about vetting vendors. The KS Expo, we're going to have, 2 of those years coming up in 2027. The second one is going to be just for board members, so it'll be even more specific to boards. And the other one is open to all residents in our communities, but, choosing the vendors, I mean, I'm the one that works with our team to be able to invite vendors that come in. We want you to, I can tell you right before we started this, the building reserves, reserve advisor, reserve company that we have had really positive experiences with. He has just said, I would love to be there. I will attend. I would also like to do quotes for every one of your communities. And that's just like, oh, really? Obviously, it's great business for him. But if you show up and you say, I'm ready for that right now, we know that we have the availability, that we have the quality, and we work really hard to be able to vet these vendors to make sure that they are going to perform for you.
And one of them, well, I don't remember who it was, but there was one that, with the Sherwin-Williams,
Yeah.
because I was looking to do paint. And, I had talked to them and I found out that.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I don't see you.
Well, let's question really quick before we, you can head out, that's completely fine. Does anybody else have any questions or want to give some feedback throughout this? Chris, do you have some finishing talking points you want to add?
Well, I was gonna see if they have any questions real quick.
Yeah.
Anyone online have a question?
You have it over there, Brian, the meeting, so if they would type in or anything.
Okay, well, not without hearing any unless they have to unmute themselves. Some final just food for thoughts is just making sure that you take the information you've learned and look at your community. Maybe you're in a great position. Maybe there's little areas you have to make adjustments for, but try to make the baby steps improvements. Don't try to change the world all at once, because you're just going to set yourself up for failure. Look for that next mailbox, that next milestone, and work towards it. And when you take those little bite-sized pieces off of things, when you take those Debbie Downer residents and you make that small tweak and they're like, okay, you turn that negative into something that was maybe a little less negative, right? All those little bit, yeah, positive Peter. All those little things, they add up. They may not seem big in the moment, but they make a big difference in the long term. And the associations aren't going away. They're not a, short-term investment. They're here forever. So if you can build that momentum, little bits and pieces at a time, it's amazing what the difference it can make.
Well, I know when, we had our last board meeting with Avery, and I did mention to him that I said, I know there's a lot of things as being on the board that we did wrong. And there's a lot of things where you can't please everybody all the time. So you find that out, but there's a lot of things both as a board and working with KS that even, well, before Avery came on, Joe was ours. And there's a lot of things that I thought were problems on both sides. So you discuss them, but like I said to him, I said, there's a lot of things that I found out that as a board, you can start small.
Yeah.
And go through, you don't want to be a Gestapo on it, but you will have to get your point across.